What's up, everybody? My name's Quincy Carrier, and welcome to a Victory Monday episode of Q&A, the show where I take your questions from the post game and answer them here on this show. And real quick, if you're new here or if you like what I do here, please make sure you hit the subscribe button or ding that notification bell so you can be notified when I upload. Also, if you ding that notification bell, you'll be notified when I put the post up for questions on the community tab. So that is a great place to be. Also, if you want to help support the show, you can join the Patreon, or you can also send one-time donations through PayPal. Both of those links are down in the description below. In this week's dog check shout-outs that go to Patreons who joined the $10 and above tier, go to Greg Ehlers, Jesus Serrano, Seth Harrison, and Max Out Dojo. So a nice, healthy, large dog check to y'all. But without further ado, let's jump into these questions. And the first question is going to be from Pangas, who says, hey Q, assuming OBJ is injured, do you see Higgins stepping up, trying to fill that gap? Also, do you think that would potentially free up Baker without having the pressure of throwing to OBJ? Now, we're going to get into the whole takes about the pressure of throwing into OBJ, why I think some of that is kind of just speculative nonsense at this point. I don't think the Browns are a better team without OBJ. I think that is going to hurt them. Hopefully he can come back this season. But assuming Odell might be out for the season, do I see Higgins being able to step up in that role? And that answer is yes and no. Yes, Higgins can do some of the things Odell can do, but also no, he can't do, obviously, he can't do all the things Odell can do. So I think this is going to take a combination between Higgins and Donovan Peoples-Jones stepping up. And maybe if Odell's out for the year, the Browns are going to use the trade deadline to bring in another wide receiver, not another top-tier wide receiver, but somebody who can take the tops off the defense. Maybe the Browns should show some interest in a guy like John Ross, who could play that Breshad Perriman role that Breshad Perriman obviously played in 2018 for the Browns, somebody who could just be a deep threat and run long and catch the ball. And I know John Ross seems to be on the outs with Cincinnati, so maybe they could throw a 6th or 7th round pick their way to get a guy like that. But I would expect the Browns to add some minor pieces that can kind of make everything between Donovan Peoples-Jones, Rashard Higgins, and then somebody else add up to what Odell can do, because Odell is a very good player not to have, especially in your wide receiving core. So they're going to have to split that up by committee now. But thanks for the question, Pangas. The next question comes from Sheepdog53, who says, is this the regression of the rushing game attack more due to Chubb or Teller, or is Hubbard not fast enough to pull for Stefanski in his own rush scheme, or are we just spoiled because of how good Chubb is and how he was covering up for some of the problems with the offensive line by being a dominant force? Chubb breaks a lot of defensive line level arm tackles that Kareem Hunt doesn't do as consistently. I don't want to say Kareem Hunt doesn't do it, but Nick Chubb just does it at a top of the league level. And I think a lot of that affects how the Browns rushing game looks. It also is because since Dearness Johnson really isn't the same level of threat that a Kareem Hunt is as that second running back, it has an effect on the run game's ability to fatigue defenses. What you were seeing when you had Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb was two top 10 level running backs just beating down a lot of opposing defenses late in games, especially in the fourth quarter, because it's too much to tackle both of those guys when they're both healthy and well rested, because they don't have to take a ton of the carries. Now Kareem Hunt's taking a bulk of the carries, and that just changes the entire dynamic. So it's not just that Nick Chubb is just that good. He is very good, but it's also the combination of having him and Kareem Hunt. Also, when it comes to the offensive line, Wyatt Teller, a little bit better than Chris Hubbard at this point. And yeah, that does make a little bit of the difference, but I think the bigger difference is having Nick Chubb in there with the combination of Kareem Hunt really fatigues a lot of defenses late in that fourth quarter, and that's when you see the Browns dominate in that area. This next question comes from Jake Paul. Just kidding. But hey, Q, big fan, man. My question is, why does Colin Cowherd diss on Baker Mayfield and the Browns for beating the Bengals, though he said that the Bengals are a very competitive team? P.S. He really just hates on Baker for no reason. So it's the Bengals take is kind of hilarious because, like, people are taking their college football takes and just bringing them to the NFL with no real rhyme or reason, because people are saying it's the Bengals, like the Bengals playing the Sun Belt. I thought they were an NFL football team. I thought they were a team that won a game in the NFL, and I thought they were a team with a franchise quarterback on the other side of the ball. Remember this, when people say it's the Bengals, are they also saying what Jesse Bates is an NFL safety? Are they also saying that Darius Phillips is a terrible cornerback? Are they also saying that Joe Burrow's not a good quarterback, that T. Higgins and AJ Green aren't good? You know, Tyler Boyd's trash. You know, all of it, the Bengals are just garbage, right? They're not worthwhile. They're not a good NFL team. They don't have a good record, so they don't have NFL players. That's what people basically assume when they say it's the Bengals. So those takes are garbage, right? There's one team in the NFL that argument kind of holds a little bit of water with, and that's the New York Jets, and that's because they're exceptionally terrible this season, much like the 2017 Browns. But even then, they're still an NFL team. And let's face facts. 22 of 22 to end the game with 5 touchdowns, almost 300 yards. That don't happen every week. Even the sorry teams, this don't happen to the Bengals every week. Did Phillip Rivers do this to the Bengals? Did he go 22 of 22 against the Bengals last week? Did Lamar Jackson go 22 of 22 against the Bengals last week? No. Exactly my point here. So when people say it's the Bengals, they're just being idiots. They're acting in bad faith, and we should not engage those who exclusively act in bad faith. And if acting in bad faith had a picture underneath it in the dictionary, it would be Colin Cowherd, because this is somebody who has built their career off of acting in bad faith, antagonizing different fan bases, and then trying to get his show syndicated in those fan bases area because the people will engage with him. You know, this is like when somebody with a Pittsburgh Steelers logo as their profile picture on Twitter, or a Pittsburgh Steelers player as their logo on their Twitter account starts tweeting, you know, all this stuff about how Baker's not good. Like, disregard it. It's a troll. He doesn't matter. He's acting in bad faith. Why does he continue to do this? Because there seems to be some money in it. There seems to be enough people willing to engage with him and willing to argue back with him, when you know for a fact nothing's going to change his mind. Baker Mayfield can finish the season 14-2, win the Super Bowl, be the Super Bowl MVP, and also win league MVP, and Colin Cowherd would call it a fluke. He did the same thing with Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl. He still has not given that man credit, and he chastised Doug Peterson and would not give him that credit because Doug Peterson wrote a book. This is who you're dealing with. This is the goalpost mover in chief. This is the goalpost mover that we're dealing with in Colin Cowherd. He's not to be taken serious. He's not to be seriously evaluated. His takes are just ridiculous for ridiculousness' sake, and that's why I don't even cover them on this channel anymore, because it's not worth covering. I mean, this guy said the Ravens were going to go 16-0 and had a good chance in going 16-0 at the beginning of the season, and that didn't even last 5 weeks. Fact of the matter is, if the Browns did not beat the Bengals and Baker Mayfield doesn't drive down the field 75 yards with 1 minute left with no timeouts and make a miraculous comeback, Colin Cowherd, he's going to lead the show with that, with Baker Mayfield not being good enough, just not clutch enough, just not this and that. But the fact that Baker Mayfield did, that don't fit his narrative, whoop, 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 can't compute. Colin Cowherd said something dumb on the internet while sitting in his little loft or whatever he's doing. It's just, come on, let's stop taking Colin Cowherd seriously or acting as if he's coming out of some kind of good faith here. Colin Cowherd's a clown. The next question comes from Gabe Greenlee, who says, "Hey, Big Q, am I overreacting when I say Baker looked much more comfortable, confident, and precise after Odell exited the game? And if Baker's success continues with OBJ out the lineup, do you see him being dealt in the offseason?" I think one thing is true, that Baker did look comfortable after Odell left the game, but also I think it has very little to do with Odell Beckham why Baker Mayfield looked more comfortable. I think that had more to do with Baker Mayfield settling in the pocket, climbing the pocket, and finding his passing lanes. I mean, if you watch the film breakdown that I did last week, that was my biggest issue with Baker Mayfield, and that's where I'm like, this is where he can find areas to be great. Watch anything Jake Burns has done. He's made this point completely clear too. When Baker finds his lanes, when Baker's calm in the pocket, Baker's actually really good. Baker usually has his head in the right place. He's just not confident in pulling the trigger at the right time. And I think what we saw this week was him being confident in his offensive line, having more sound pocket mechanics, and making those throws and being able to pull the trigger at the right moments. And the good thing about this is that this is progress that started at the beginning of the season and has worked his way up. Even the last 2 weeks where he's looked awful, he stayed in the pocket more often. And this week, he still stayed in the pocket. And this time, the offensive line rewarded him with a clean pocket, and he made a lot of things happen. He was able to step up and make these plays. And that's the difference, right? How many of these highlights were Baker Mayfield bailing from the pocket and throwing a ball deep on the run? No, that's not what happened this week. A lot of this was Baker Mayfield standing in there, settling, stepping up, or sliding left or right to find his lane, and then hitting his man. And I think that was the difference. I think that has very little to do with Odell being out there or Baker just magically seeing the field better or not. I don't think that had anything to do with it, because Baker was seeing these things well. He was reading defenses well. He was seeing the field well. He just wasn't pulling the trigger, and he wasn't settling in the pocket. And those are the two things that happened. I don't know how much that has to do with Odell Beckham, though. The next question comes from Emmanuel Rosa, who says, hey, Quincy, after watching the game against the Bengals, was frustrated with Baker Mayfield at first, but then he picked it up, and I loved it. I still think the game could have been lost because of our horrible, horrible defense so far. Aside from Miles and Wards, no one did anything. I think we need to trade for Anthony Harris, another safety, to help this defense. What do you think? I think a lot of the issues that we saw with the Browns defense this week was something that, look, on paper made sense, but in practice made very little. And that is the Browns blitzing a lot. And I get why they did it, right? Joe Burrow seems to struggle underneath the blitz. It's what Baltimore dominated him with. But the Browns just need to understand they're not Baltimore. They're not going to be able to have these schemes out here that are going to confuse Joe Burrow. And I think that's the big difference. Joe Burrow under pressure is fine. Joe Burrow, when he's confused, is the problem. And he just wasn't confused by the blitz. The Browns weren't that creative. The Browns weren't able to put out some of those UFO packages that Pittsburgh and Baltimore can put out there. And it just wasn't as successful. And when the Browns blitz a lot, it leaves a lot of their flaws wide open, which is, the ability to cover in the middle of the field. And I'm a firm proponent. The Browns do not need to blitz this season that much, because you need all the help that you can give to the secondary, because outside of Denzel and sometimes Terrence Mitchell, you got nothing else in there on the inside, and you really don't help Andrew Sadeo out when you leave him one-on-one with a wide receiver when he's already slow to begin with. So, yeah, the Browns should look and see if they can trade for somebody, but I don't think they should bite if the price is too high. And I think the Browns' issues this week had to do more with the game plan coming into it being flawed than anything. Next question comes from Elliott Mills, who says, hey, Quincy, can you explain where Baker Mayfield's performance came from and what Stefanski can do to get him working at that level more regularly? The good news is Baker Mayfield don't really need anything from Kevin Stefanski at this point. Kevin Stefanski has provided everything to Baker Mayfield. This was Baker Mayfield taking a huge step in his development when it comes to his comfort in the pocket. And this is something he had in 2018 and 2019 completely took from him. It seems to be that he's wiping all that off, because that's been the biggest issue with Baker Mayfield at the beginning of this season. It's just not staying in clean pockets. This time, right? How many times did Baker Mayfield just instinctively kind of bail from the pocket early on in this season? This week, you didn't see that. You saw Baker Mayfield stay comfortable and utilize everything his offensive line was doing for him when it came to a pass blocking standpoint. And that was the difference for the Browns, right? That was the difference for Baker Mayfield. And that's why Baker Mayfield was able to do these things he hasn't done since 2018 this week. It doesn't have to do much with Odell. It has to do a lot with Baker just being comfortable in the pocket, being able to settle in, step up, find his lanes, and feel confident in hitting his man. And it had shown signs of that coming back, but This week was the first time in practice that he had done it. I hope he continues to do it, but that's a big sign for Baker Mayfield. That's a good sign for the Cleveland Browns that that's how he played when he was comfortable in this pocket. The next question comes from Devin, who says, should the Browns look into Marcellus Darius, the defensive tackle, or Clinton Dix at safety for free agents instead of making a trade? Yeah, I mean, you can try. Like, it wouldn't hurt to bring Clinton Dix in, but, like, temper your expectation if they do, because Clinton Dix got cut from the Cowboys, and that's the worst secondary in the NFL. So I just don't know how much he's going to help there. Maybe he can play a role that he couldn't in Dallas, but there's just not a lot of great options. Safeties are super expensive. Like, look how much the Steelers paid for Minkah Fitzpatrick. Look what the price was for Jamal Adams. Safeties aren't cheap. That's why the Browns drafted Grant Delpit where they drafted him, and it's just unfortunate he got injured. So next year you're going to have healthy Grant Delpit. Hopefully he can recover from that Achilles. Maybe you draft somebody also, but safety should be a top priority for the Cleveland Browns in the offseason. I just don't see them being able to find a solution in the middle of the season that's going to be worthwhile. Next question comes from Giant Man, who says, what does this win mean for the rest of the season, and do you see the Browns making a trade before the deadline? Longtime watcher. Keep up the great work. Shout out to Giant Man. Giant Man actually sent some super chats in the last video, so again, shout out to you. What does this win mean? It means that the Browns can win in multiple different ways, right? At the beginning of the season, we were like, hey, if you stop the run, you stop the Browns. Now, the Browns did not run the ball to win the game. They threw the ball to win the game, and that's a huge difference. That's a huge step for this team. Now, with Odell Beckham being out, what is reported for the season with the ACL tear, that's a terrible break for the Browns. And hopefully some other guys can step up. Maybe the Browns make a trade for John Ross or somebody to fill in some of the smaller things that Odell does. It means a lot. You know, the Browns are going to go into the bye week at minimum 5-3, at best 6-2. You have a favorable schedule coming up on the horizon in a year where 7 teams are going to make the playoffs. So you're in good position if you're the Cleveland Browns to be able to make the playoffs for the first time since 2002, and that is significant. Also, sweeping a division rival, you know, that's important. That's a good thing to do, winning a division game on the road, and also knowing all your road division games are also out the way. You play Pittsburgh, you play Baltimore again, but you get them at home on your terms. So you have a favorable schedule coming up. It's about, can you execute and can you finish this season like the Browns finished that game, and like the Browns have finished many games this year. Can they finish it? That's going to be the question. The last question comes from Converge, who says, Joe Wood seemed totally outmatched calling plays today. Do you think it was personnel or scheme problems? I think it was a game plan. I think the game plan was flawed. Look, I get the Browns want the blitz, but I just don't think they're good at that. I felt like the Browns should have just stuck with the 4-man rush and just kind of smothered the middle of the field so Joe Burrow couldn't have it. I felt like that would have been more successful. I get why they wanted to try it, but ultimately I don't think it did them any favors. Also, it didn't help that your defensive line really didn't get a lot of pressure with Cincinnati's backups in there. So the defensive line just needs to play better if that's what they're going to do. So yeah, it was a scheme issue. Yeah, it was a game plan issue, but also, you know, the personnel in the field really didn't execute at a high level outside of what Denzel Ward and Myles Garrett. Nobody was really executing, and I get that this defense isn't that great, but they can execute at a higher level than what they did this week. But again, thank you for the question, and that's it for this video. I want to thank all the Patreon supporters and anybody who has donated anything through PayPal. You guys have really been a lifeline for this channel. So again, thank you for that support, and I hope that support can continue. I hope you guys enjoy what I do here. But with all that being said, again, guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.